Hi, 4th grade. It's Miss Mold. I hope you guys all had a wonderful and restful spring break. Today we're going to start Unit 7, and Unit 7 covers multiplying fractions and measurement. So we're going to get started with today's lesson, which is 7-1, converting liquid measures using that U.S. customary units that we talked about. So first, let's warm up with a little bit of mental math. If you didn't do the mental math on your own, as always, I suggest pausing this video and giving it a try yourself before you listen to my explanation. Okay, let's start with this first set of problems. As you will notice, the denominators are the same. When the denominators are the same, all you have to do is multiply the numerators. And we know that 3 plus 3 is 6. And that denominator doesn't change, so x is equal to 6, and 3/10 plus 3/10 equals 6/10. All right, 8/10 plus 1/10 equals 9/10. 3/10 plus 4/10 equals 7/10. All right, let's get a little bit more challenging. So as you can see here, we start to have mixed denominators. Here's tenths, this one's in hundredths. But you'll notice they want the answer in hundredths. So that means you need to change 5/10 to something that's equivalent with the denominator of 100. So the way you're going to do that, I'm going to do my thinking over here. I know if 5/10, and you can make equivalent with hundredths because 10 is a multiple of 100 is a multiple of 10. You're going to think to yourself, what times 10 would give me 100? And I know that 10 times 10 would give me 100. So that means 5 times 10 is 50. 50 hundredths. Because remember, whatever you multiply the denominator by, you have to do the same thing to the numerator always. So this now becomes, instead of 5/10, it now becomes 50 hundredths. And now I could just add across. So 50 plus 31 is 84. 84 hundredths. So x represents 84. Okay, we're going to do the same thing for the next two sets of problems. So 9/10 plus 2 hundredths. Here's tenths. Here's hundredths. And they want the answer in hundredths. So we're going to do the same thing. 9 times 10 equals x hundredths. And I know I'm going to have to multiply the numerator and denominator by 100 to get 10, to make it from tenths to hundredths. And I get 90. So x is 90. 90. Sorry, this is 90 hundredths. And then you could just add across. So x is actually 92 hundredths. Okay, last one. Tenths, hundredths, and they want the answer in hundredths. So again, same thing. I'm going from tenths to hundredths, so I have to multiply by 10, and I have to do the same thing to the numerator, and I get 60. So this now becomes 60 hundredths, and my answer is 79 hundredths, because 60 plus 19 is 79. Okay, final set for our mental math, and this is the most challenging, and you will see why in a second. So they give us different denominators, tenths and hundredths, just like the last set, but if you notice, they do not tell us what they want the answer in. So what that means is we can have the answer in tenths or hundredths. I'm going to show you both ways on how to do it, and then you could choose whichever strategy you like best. One is multiplication, one is dividing. So whatever you think you're stronger in, I would choose that strategy. Okay, so 2 tenths, and I want to make it into hundredths. Let me actually move this over so I have room to work here. I'm taking 2 tenths, and I want to make it into hundredths, so I could leave 30 hundredths. And I know I'm going to multiply by 10, and when I multiply 2 times 10, I'm going to get 20. So this is 20 hundredths. And 20 times 30 is 50 hundredths. Or, now I'm going to show you how to do it if I was changing the hundredths to tenths. So 30 hundredths. Now, instead of multiplying by 10, how do I get from 100 to tenths? I have to divide by 10. And whatever I do to the top, I have to do to the, whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So 30 divided by 10 is 3. 30 hundredths is equivalent to 3 tenths. It means they're the same. They're equivalent fractions. So I'm just going to draw this over here. So I keep 2 tenths plus 3 tenths equals 5 tenths. And you will notice that 50 hundredths is equivalent to 5 tenths. Okay, we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to do this problem with the denominator 100. And I'm going to do this problem with my answer in tenths, so you could see both strategies. So 4 tenths, I have to multiply by 10 to both sides, so it becomes 40 hundredths. And 40 plus 20 is 60, and you get 60 hundredths. If you did it in tenths, you would get 6 tenths. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing here. If I divide hundredths by 10, this becomes 10, and this becomes a 1. 2 plus 1 is 3. 3 tenths, or 30 hundredths. All right, let's get to our math message. Now, they're showing you this graphic here, and it probably looks a little confusing. So let's first read what they want us to do. It says, think. How can the picture above help you remember how many cups are in a pint, how many pints are in a quart, and how many quarts are in a gallon? So the measurements we're dealing with are cups, pints, quarts, and gallons. That is how we measure liquid items in the United States, using the United States customary units of measurement for liquid. So you'll probably notice you might have a cup when you're measuring milk when you're making cookies. You might have a quart or a gallon of milk. So how can this picture help us understand how much? Well, the first thing that I notice is the G in here is quite large. So that must be the biggest unit of measurement. And I notice that inside this G, I see 4 Q's. And I know the G must stand for gallons, and there's only 1 G. So maybe for every 1 gallon, there's 4 quarts. 1 gallon is 4 quarts, because there's 4 Q's inside. Okay, so now they're saying a half gallon. How many quarts are in half of a gallon? So if I just draw an imaginary line down here, right? This shows 1/2 of a gallon, and this shows 1/2 of a gallon. And I notice that there's only 2 Q's in a half of a gallon. So there's 2 quarts for every half gallon. All right, now they're asking you how many if for 1 quart, how many pints? So now I'm going to look at inside just one of those Q's. And I notice that there are 2 P's inside of that Q. So that must mean that there's 2 pints for every quart. And finally, they're asking how many pints, for 1 pint, how many cups? And that is represented by the letter C. And I notice that there is in one of those P's, because remember, that P stands for 1 pint. 1 pint. So if we're just looking at 1, I notice that there's 2 C's. So there must be 2 cups for every pint. Okay, so we are going to be using these units of measurement to do our journal pages, but watch the next video for some practice problems so you can kind of better understand how to do this concept.